If this is your first time checking out our channel, we like to recap each and every episode of Critical Role before we dive into our deep discussion and theory craft portion, just to catch everybody up. And especially in the case of an episode like this, where it's 5 hours long, we feel like it's good to have a little bit of a refresher before diving in. So if you're on that recap video and you want to see our full discussion, it will be linked down in the description below. Now, in this case, we did have some technical difficulties, so when I switch on over to the podcast, you're going to miss like the first 30 seconds of Blake starting the recap. But all you missed was him basically saying that Bell's Hells is on the Silver Sun airship and they are on this long journey headed to the Tishtan excavation site for the apogee solstice.
But basically, as they're heading their way, they're pretty much going through the list of just desperation of who can we call. Like, we are definitely swinging out of our league. Like, we need to find people who can help us. So over the next few days, they're going to be contacting several people being like, hey, is there any way you can help us? So having said that, they do reach out to Ira Wendigoth, and just to see if they can, bring in the chaos factor and just see if Ira would be interested. They let Ira know that they destroyed the Malleus Key in the Feywild, and Ira's pretty much like, okay, I'm listening. I'm really curious about this. And basically says, hey, we're heading to the next one at the Tishtan excavation site. You want to come hang? And he's like, let's come talk. Come to Bosphorus to the site, a few hours outside, back with Fern's parents. That's where I'm hanging out. Come see me. And they're like, okay, so let's head to Bosphorus. They also, since they're heading that way, they reached out to Imahara Joe, and they're like, hey, can you build us a bomb but bigger? And he's kind of like, it's going to take a while. I don't know if I can do something like that. And then separate from that, they also are going to call out to Milo, who's Ashton's friend, Ebenold Kai, who they find out is stranded in the Fire Realm with... Since Plane Rider Rin has no means of actually getting them out of her domain, they reach out to Dorian, actually a couple times to Dorian, but Orm reaches out to Dorian and is basically like, hey, is there any way you can help? And Dorian's like, hey, we have problems of our own. Opal, in fact, this episode had a lot of callbacks to EXU, by the way, which we'll talk about in the episode. But Opal, who's wearing a vestige of Divergence, the crown of Lolth, basically Dorian says, hey, she's been getting really dark lately. Like, we have a lot going on here. And so I'm probably not able to come help. Other than that, Chetney, throughout these several days of travel, you can just know that Chetney's going to be really hung up on the sinkholes that are on the map of this area that Matt had provided several episodes earlier. And pretty much every chance he gets, he's going to be thinking about some kind of plan with the sinkholes. Every character they run into, he's going to ask them about the sinkholes and is really honed in. You think I'm joking, but through 5 hours, I think he mentions it 6 or 7 times about, really honing in on this sinkhole plan. More time goes on. They decide, okay, we might even need Liliana on our side. And so they decide to reach out to Liliana and hope that maybe she's sleeping. And if she is sleeping, maybe they can kind of get her alone outside of the view of Adahan to possibly convince her to join up with them. So Imogen scries on her. I don't know if that's what you'd actually call it. That's kind of what I've been describing it as. Basically scries on her in her dream. And Liliana's kind of like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And realizes that Imogen is reaching out. Imogen is basically like, Mom, what you doing? Why are you trying to destroy the world? And Liliana, we get sort of the first look at her motivation, which is basically like, you don't understand what's going on here. I'm freeing all of us. I'm freeing all of us from like the bondage of basically fate, like what the lives the gods have dictated for us. And that's a really good thing. After this dream, the party, and really this is a theme through the episode, the party talks a lot about maybe freeing Predathos is a good thing. Maybe the Ruby Vanguard isn't that bad. And we get this line from Orem, who's like, oh, that's great. I wish my whole family didn't have to die for, this plan to happen.
Yeah.
And Imogen's like, oh, right, I forgot that all your friends are dead. So, right, they're the bad guys. My bad. There's also a nice little bit with FCG continuing to rely on the Changebringer and basically ask Changebringer, not all the gods are bad. Like Changebringer, you're good, right? And like flips a coin and says like, you're not good. And then basically says like, should I trust you or something like that? And flips it and says no. And he's like, oh my
Oh
gosh. So
God.
he's like really having some issues. Um, Another one of the evenings, the party's kind of settled down. Laudna and Ashton have this great one-to-one. It's very similar to the one-on-one they had back during the dust storm when they were in Bosseros
Yeah. Yeah.
before the encounter with the Paragon's Call. And there's just an amazing conversation. Laudna really kind of like pokes and prods at his rocky exterior, pun intended. And it's kind of like, what's going on with you? What's happening? What's up with that Hishari mask that you keep? And Ashton basically says, this is all I really, I'm linked to it in some way. And he admits that the only reason he stayed with the party was because when Orym was described as an Ashari, he thought they said Hishari. And he's been following them, not ever since, but that was like the original reason for it. But then there was this amazing question where, as Ashton's getting a little drunk, he says, Laudna, when you died and you woke up and we were all there, what did it feel like to have all of your friends there?
Oof.
Calling back to when he woke up and he had been abandoned by his friends, the nobodies. And Laudna basically said, it was the greatest feeling because it wasn't like that the first time she woke up. So just a really great conversation. So the last little detail before we cut to break is Orym and Fern have a conversation that's basically like, hey, I'm kind of worried about Imogen flipping sides. And I think Orym basically says, hey, if that happens, Fern, it's going to have to be you. And Fern's like,
Yeah.
me? And he's like, going to have to be you to take out Imogen. And it was kind of funny just seeing the party, or just like Laura Bailey just kind of being like, are you guys serious right now? Anywho, all that to say, that's the first half. We cut to break, and then Will, why don't you take it from there?
Yes, sir. And again, 5-hour episode. I'm gonna do my best to be brief, but there's a lot here. So when we pick back up after the break, we're told, Matt tells us that it's 10 days until the solstice. And as you know, we're all
Oh,
traveling, so every
and
day somebody new is gonna roll for like the travel conditions.
and can you mention also, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
No, you're
just the
good.
state of like the Aurora. That was like a main thing that I forgot about, but maybe you can plug that in as
Yeah.
well.
So like while
Sorry
they're
about that.
traveling, they can physically see like the magical ley lines of Exandria like converging on this nexus point, which we know to be the Tishtan excavation site. So like the closer they get, I kind of imagined it like the Aurora Borealis, like the Northern
Yeah,
Lights kind of, but they
right.
can like physically see it. And a bit more on that in a second. But so Laudna is the first one to roll for this day of travel, and she rolls an 11 and basically travels uneventful. Like it's a fine day. They travel at a normal pace. FCG, Blake mentioned was flipping the coin, asking these questions, and being kind of disturbed by the answers. They have seemingly come to peace with that by saying that God's work in mysterious ways. So that's why the Changebringer was giving me those answers.
Right.
Um, so again, they're messaging people on the travel, and so the next person they decide to message is Pike, since she, would probably want to protect the gods, seeing as she, is this holy person that serves the Everlight. So FCG messages Pike, gives Pike the scoop, and Pike says like, "Oh, like that's a lot. Let me look into that and get back to you." Um, Imogen then messages Gianna Hexam at the behest of Ashton and asks her for contacts in Bassaros. Basically, saying they need weapons, they need supplies. Like who should they talk to? And she says, "Drop my name to Eunice." So the next day, day 9, or 9 days till the solstice, rather, FCG rolls a 19. So it's another pretty easy travel day. Fern and Ashton start to learn from Captain Zandis about how to pilot the ship, just because they think it would be good to have, some people in the party that know what to do should the circumstance arrives. Imogen messages Morrigan asking, her for help, and if they know how, and if she knows how to depetrify somebody, referring to plane rider Rin. Mori responds that she's recovering from an injury, but honestly, she's most powerful in her home anyway. So she'll be watching and she'll help in any way she can. And that, yes, there are indeed ways to like remove petrification. FCG then messages Dancer and warns them to stay safe, but does not get a response. And then at the behest of Imogen, FCG reaches out to this mysterious D, who is the person that he was told sold him to Dancer originally. This actually works just based on the description of D. He is able to connect with the message. And FCG asks, like, hey, like, where'd you find me? Are there more people like me? And D says that, oh, this is a wonderful surprise to hear from you. This is my gift to you, like to put you back on the path. Now, your future is your own. And D just says, like, I pulled you from the wreckage, and yes, there are more of you and more to come. So we then skip ahead to 7 days until the solstice, basically. And Fern rolls for the travel and gets a nat 1. So Matt has her then roll a d6 and she gets a 3. And he basically describes this massive like wall of dust, this dust storm approaching them. And essentially what it is the party has to, I think, reach 3 successes before they reach 2 or 3 failures for this weather encounter, and that will determine if they're success or if they're successful or they fail. Unfortunately, they fail. So the mast of the ship breaks and they ultimately lose a day of travel. Orem messages Dorian again with the sending stone and asks, hey, can you guys see the ley lines like we can where you are? And Dorian says, yes, we can, but don't really have time to take in the beauty of it because things are pretty tense right now. And Fern wonders, yeah, I wonder like if this is affecting Opal. And the rest of the party's like, who's Opal? So they quickly explain that, she's just a friend of theirs. Then Imogen messages the Callaways and Ira and basically lets them know, hey, we're almost to you guys, so be ready, and that they'll be coming to the Callaway hideaway. On the next day, Imogen rolls for the weather, gets an 18, so it's pretty calm. They make it to the hideaway. Fern, greets her parents. Hondir is there, and Ira is there as well, messing with the, mini Malleus key in the back. And they basically have a quick conversation with Ira, asking, like, why do you hold a grudge? And he's like, well, Ludinus hired me to build that first machine, and then they kicked me out. So I will gladly help, mess with them now. And they're like, what exactly does the machine do that you designed? And he said that Ludinus just said he wanted a channeling device, something that could gather energy, initially to make an anchor and then an accelerant. And he's like, that one in the Feywild was the very first one. So then he actually gets FCG and has him look into the telescope device, and it's pointed at the excavation site, and he can see that like there's a lot of activity there. The Paragon's Call is there, the Ruby Vanguard is there, the robots that are quasi Aormaton are there, and then the vision in the telescope goes black, and Ira explains that every minute on the minute there's like an anti-magic dispel pulse that goes out kind of as a defense mechanism. So Fern then quickly mentions that, hey, Morgan says hi, and Ira's like, well, tell her I said hi. And then the party basically divides and conquers for their tasks here. Laudna and Chetney are going to stay and repair the boat. Orem, Imogen, and Ashton are going to go into town to get the supplies, and FCG is going to like load up the bomb that Imahara built for them into the ship. So the town crew makes their way into Bosseros via a crawler, and they go to Eunice's shop. Ashton name drops Hexam, and Eunice is like, oh, I've never heard that name before, as he kind of walks up to the front door and locks it, and then he's like, follow me. And he leads them to like a secret hidden back door. And they do a little bit of shopping, but just to, be brief with it, they end up spending about 14,000 gold, and they get a couple of healing potions and 3 magical items. An item that increases your constitution, an item that basically makes it so like no one can read your mind, and I think like you can't be scried upon was the vibe I got. And then finally a belt called the Belt of Momentum that like makes you do like an enhanced melee attack if you like run 25 feet beforehand or something like that. So they buy all those things, make it back to like everyone reconvenes, and Orem messages Dorian one more time saying that, hey, things are getting really bad. You should gather everybody up and head underground until you hear from me again. Dorian says, like, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do that. It's a little hairy on this end. So now we're at 5 days to go till the solstice. Orem rolls a 3 for travel, so then he rolls the d6 and gets a 1. And Matt describes this new weather that they run into are like these arcane winds, like magically enhanced thanks to like this ley line energy that's going on. So once again, we have another skill versus failure challenge, and here they fail again. And the Silver Sun actually like kind of crashes into the Hellcatch below, and they lose another day of travel making repairs. 4 days to go. Ashton rolls a natural 1, and then on his d6 rolls a 6. And
It's so bad.
it was terrible. They encounter this, like, I don't know if it's fair to call it a phoenix, but they encounter this very large phoenix-esque
I
bird
think he
creature.
uses the word phoenix. I'm pretty sure Matt
Okay.
does.
And it
But they
starts.
fail. Sorry to interrupt you. They
No, you're
fail
good.
the Arcana check to like know exactly what it is, but
That's
he
right.
says it's like a phoenix-like bird.
That's right. And so it's attacking them, but quickly, pretty near the start of this encounter, Fern actually casts polymorph to turn it into a goldfish, and she's successful, and it just gets like swept away in the wind. Um, and it only lasts for an hour, or if it took damage, it would pop back out. But neither of those things seemingly happen quickly enough, and they are able to escape because of it. So they continue the journey. 3 days to go. Chetney rolls a 17 for this day. Clear skies, clear sailing. But it's on this day that Orem feels like a thrumming from his pouch, and he finds the seed that was given to him back in EXU by the Tetrarch Thrasker is glowing. And FCG identifies it as a message bloom. So the party quickly like plant it. It sprouts into this beautiful flower, and like as it blooms, a message comes out, and it's from Keyleth. And I'm just going to read exactly what it is really quick. Orem, the cult of the dark heart beneath Terra was a challenging maze of dangers for the Ashari. Present, but the dark heart behemoth was dealt with, and the rift returned to its controlled state. We lost some good warriors in that fight, but their sacrifice will be remembered and cherished. I message you because I attempted to apprehend Vireo, the head of the Ashari sect of betrayers, but he vanished, shouting, "The vanguard will prevail, and the world will finally be free." We couldn't stop him, but given all you've told me and the signs pointing to a connection between these events, it would seem our paths are converging. Please let us know where this vanguard makes its work. Perhaps I can gather those who can recover within the Ashari to help stand against Ludinus and his vanguard. Afterwards, the flower withers away and the seed disappears as well. Imogen messages Keyleth in response, says, "Hey, we got your message. We are about 2 days away from the Tishkan excavation site, which is where this is going down." And Keyleth responds and says, "Awesome. I will meet you there ASAP." 2 days to go. Laudna rolls a 15, so travel is fine. Quiet day. Orem and Imogen share a brief conversation where she asks about his tattoo and is like, "Is it surreal that like you had that tattoo and now like all this is happening?" And Orem's like, "Yeah, it is kind of surreal. Like, who knew?" And then basically the conversation ends with Orem saying like, "Hey, you know what? I'm not worried about you." And she's like, "Are you telling the truth?" And he says, "I always tell the truth." Imogen then goes to Laudna, and they share this really like deep heart to heart moment.
It's a great best friend moment.
Yeah. Great best friend moment. And they basically tell each other how much they mean to one another and how much they love one another. And Imogen calls Laudna her tether. And Laudna's like, "Yeah, in this life, in this realm or the next, basically." Then they go to sleep. Bell's Hells gets a long rest, awakening to the final day's travel. And that's where the episode ends.
Great
Ooh,
job, man.
long one.
That's a lot to summarize for sure. Don't go anywhere just yet, everybody. If you're checking out just the recap, click the link to get our full discussion. And we want to know what you thought about this episode.